Okay, lesson 4.4. So far in this unit, we've talked a lot about the characters, these people, King Louis and Queen Marie Antoinette, and all of the horrible things that they've done. And they have done some things that are just awful, that have a really negative impact on the country of France. But does that mean that they are necessarily bad individuals? Um, One thing that becomes a major issue in the French Revolution is that these two people do become the scapegoats because they are the figureheads. They are the visible symbols of everything that's wrong with France. We continue talking about these causes of revolution because they're very, very important in understanding why the people revolt and some of their goals in what they want to see happen. In general, the people are just dissatisfied. There is a lack of political power. They're starving. There is nothing good about being a French citizen. Well, there's very few things that are good about being a French citizen. Most people are not allowed to vote. They're not allowed to have any participation in the government. With the estate system, um, all the power really lies in the first and second estate. That's 2% of a 25 million large country. So regular citizens feel disenchanted about the process, that they have no voice, no impact. Taxes, we've talked about this a ton, that due to ongoing long-term debt and then more recent wars fought by Louis XVI, the French people, especially the Third Estate, are taxed an incredible amount. And then we have the Enlightenment, this movement starting in the late 1600s, philosophers who are talking about the rights of citizens, natural rights given to them by God, the Rousseau and Locke and all of these guys that we've continued to talk about. So these are all of these ongoing, long-term causes. I want you to think of these causes like a spring that twists and twists and goes on and on and on and on. But the more you twist it, the more pressure builds up. Okay, so you're going to watch two videos. There's one on the causes of the Enlightenment and historical wife swap. Those are over to your right if you're watching this in Canvas. So last time we saw Louis XVI, 1774. He had just become king. He's 20 years old. Now we're at about 1789. This is how he looks now. A little bit chunkier, but still very, very royal. Again, he just, from the Take 5, he wasn't well equipped to be king. He wasn't well educated or prepared to be king. And we talked about that with Marie Antoinette. Now, when they started off, remember we watched the video when they got married and they were very good friends. Finally, they are more than friends. After 8 years of marriage, their first child is born, Marie Therese, named after Queen Marie Antoinette's mother, Maria Theresa in Austria. And then finally, the long hoped for and needed heir to the throne, Louis Joseph. He is the first boy, so then he becomes the Dauphin, the crown prince of France. They end up having two more children, another boy, Louis Charles, and another girl, Sophie, and they decide to have a family portrait painted. But while they are in the middle of having it painted, because painting a portrait takes months, little Sophie dies. We keep seeing this. It was not uncommon for children to die before the age of 6 was very common. Unfortunately, the painting had already been begun, and the cradle was already painted in the setting. So they drape the black cloth of mourning over it. It's a very sad event. And that's something to remember, that even though these people were royal, even though in many ways their spending had caused some of the problems of revolution that would lead to revolution, they still have personal tragedy. They still have personal issues. There's a very famous saying, let them eat cake, and it becomes popular to say that, Queen Marie Antoinette is so out of touch with the people, and she was out of touch with the people, but she's so unaware of the situation in France that someone told her that the people had no bread. And she said, well, if they have no bread, let them eat cake. She did not say this, but it was a very popular rumor in 1789. This actually comes from a novel that Rousseau wrote in 1768. Again, Louis the 16th and Marie Antoinette are scapegoats. Yes, they caused a lot of issues, but they also were not entirely to blame. They were the result of their situation. She did not say, let them eat cake. She was out of touch with the people, but not that out of touch. So that brings us to the Estates General. King Louis XVI, he realizes that things are pretty bad. So he decides to call together the meeting of the Estates General. Representatives are elected from each of the three estates, and they are going to come together and discuss some of these problems in France, because King Louis realizes, the people are getting upset. The people want to have their voices heard. So the last time this happened was in 1614, so this is pretty significant. It's been about 170 years since the meeting of the Estates General took place, and that is because of absolutism. For 170 years, for 5 generations essentially, the King of France has not wanted to hear from the people. He doesn't care what the people has to say. Now King Louis XVI realizes the people are getting pretty pissed off about this. So our Estates General begins meeting on May 5th, 1789. They're going to meet at Versailles. And King Louis, and trying to do a good job, he thinks there should be some ceremony, some pomp and circumstance. So there is a huge parade to begin this meeting. And again, I said that the royal family was experiencing some tragedy in their family. They lost little Sophie. And poor Dauphin Louis Joseph, he was always a sickly child, even from birth. And by this point in 1789, he is essentially on his deathbed. Louis Joseph is propped up with pillows in the window so he can see his father leading this fantastic parade. Very weak, very sick, just sort of deluding himself that he too will be king one day. But he won't. So King Louis XVI, he is trying to repair his country while at the same time his son is dying. So he is experiencing personal tragedies, but he's trying to do what is best for the country. The Third Estate in particular comes to this meeting with what are called cahiers, Caheier. It's a document with all of these problems, things that they want to see resolved. They are ready to work, ready to negotiate. But one problem is that even though they gave the Third Estate more representatives, when it comes to voting, each estate gets one vote. So it becomes equal. And the First and Second Estate will always outvote the Third. So this was a political cartoon that was printed during this time of the Estates General. Sort of like when you go to a restaurant with a bunch of friends and there's the one person who orders 5 things and you only order 1 thing, and they say, well, let's just split it evenly. You want separate checks. You are happy to pay for your portion, for your fair share. But you can see here the member of the Third Estate who's leaning over the waitress and says, hey, separate checks. I am happy to pay for my fair share, but I am no longer satisfied supporting the First and Second Estate. For 6 weeks, these meetings go on at the Estates General. They come up with suggestions, they vote. Third Estate is always outvoted. So the Third Estate is incredibly frustrated. Also, in this time, the young Dauphin, Louis Joseph, has died. So what would have been common and traditional at that time was for sort of the royal family to pull away from public life and essentially shut down the palace as a sign of their mourning. So these meetings are continuing to take place in some of the meeting rooms, but for the most part, the Palace of Versailles is shut down. The Third Estate is so fed up with the Estates General, they decide they're going to break away from this meeting, and they're going to create their own government in a way. They are going to be the legislature, the representative body, because they really are the most representative of the citizens of France. So they call themselves the National Assembly. They think, okay, well, if we're breaking away, we probably shouldn't stay in the same meeting rooms as the First and Second Estate. So they go to look for another place to meet, but they are locked out. Now, some historians say that it is because the royal family was in mourning over the recently died prince. Some people say it was because Louis prevented them from meeting. He did not want the Third Estate to break away and get some independence. Either way, the people are pissed off. So they have to find somewhere to meet. They're at Versailles. Most of the meeting rooms are closed. They end up going to a tennis court, and this is how a royal tennis court would have looked in the 1700s. It's similar, sort of a combination of tennis and wall ball. And this is the very famous painting by David, Jacques-Louis David, of what happened at the tennis court. If you look at this, there is sort of this light of knowledge and the Enlightenment coming in. The people look passionate. Many of them are using sort of ancient Roman oaths or a salute. Perhaps it was more familiar to you as the Heil Hitler salute, but taking it from ancient Rome because Rome was a republic, representation of the citizens. So this is at the tennis court. You can see in the front, there's actually members of all three estates shaking hands because there were some people in the first and second estates who were sympathetic to the third, who understood why they were unhappy and wanted to do what was best for the country as a whole. So this leads us to the tennis court oath. This is June 20th, 1789. First, once they break away and they're the National Assembly, first they just have to vent a bit. So they make all these speeches about what they want to see accomplished. What is the purpose of this National Assembly? And then they draw up an oath, and they all take it. And the major part of that oath is they agree that they will not separate, and they will reassemble wherever circumstances require until the Constitution of the Kingdom is established. Now, just with this language, it is not violent. It is not incredibly radical. It's passionate, but it's very logical that we're not going to separate, we're not going to break up until we achieve this goal. And this goal is a constitution, a legal political document giving citizens more rights. And they say of the kingdom, their goal is not to get rid of the king. They want to keep the system in place. They just want to amend it. They want to change it. So by the end of June 1789, the people are taking charge more. This buildup and this momentum towards revolution continues. Okay, that's it for 4.4.